The transgender rights bill goes to Governor DeWine. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. A bill to place restrictions on transgender kids and their parents sits on the desk of Governor DeWine. Lawmakers this week gave final approval to a bill that restricts gender-affirming care for transgender minors and bans transgender girls from participating on female sports teams. Supporters say the measure protects children and maintains a level playing field for female athletics. LGBT advocates argue the measure stigmatizes kids and could hurt minors who need the treatment. And in all of Ohio, 7 trans girls play on female high school sports teams after completing the required 1 year of hormone therapy. Joe Ingles, Governor DeWine has opposed particularly the sports bans in the past when it comes to transgender athletes. Where does he stand on this? Will he sign it or veto it?
That is the million-dollar question, Mike. I don't know. I asked him, a couple hours ago, reporters were talking to him about this very thing, and he said he hadn't received the bill as of Friday morning yet, but he probably has received it by the time this show airs. But not only that, he has 10 days from that time to determine whether he wants to sign it or not. He says he's going to spend the weekend looking at it and listening to the testimony of experts who testified on it, and then he'll make a decision.
Jesse, there were some changes made between the original House bill and the Senate version, and then went back to the House bill. There was a grandfather clause in there.
Yeah, there's been actually a decent amount of changes to this bill, and particularly the sports bill has been around for a couple years now, and there have been some fits and starts to that one as well. Really all eyes are going to be on Mike DeWine at this point. When he was talking with reporters, he said that he thinks that both sides care about children, but where will he ultimately land on this issue?
Mike, this comes down to parental rights. A lot of conservatives argue that parents should have the right to pick the books in their libraries, the curriculum in their schools. But in this case, they're telling parents if they want to get gender-affirming care for their kids, the hormone therapy, puberty blockers, that they can't. Is that inconsistent? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think there was countless testimony from OBGYNs, doctors, and other medical professionals said to talk about the harm it would do. So let's balance it and say, look, there's people on both sides of the aisle, as the governor said, and in the medical community too. I think what the legislature said is, look, we're going to ban it for minors as it relates to the surgeries and stuff. And that's probably the right thing to do. As for the school sports issue, my daughter plays varsity sports, and if a boy played in her sport, she'd get creamed. So I think it's important to protect our daughters in sports, our girls. And if we put that on the ballot, Mike, it would pass 60-70% of the vote, that girls should play girls sports and boys should play boys sports.
So just to be clear, the ban on treatment goes well beyond surgery. It talks about the hormones and the puberty blockers as well. Counseling is okay.
Yes.
But Derek, they say that if you're going to counsel a minor on gender-affirming care, you also have to counsel them on other things, anxiety, depression, ADHD even.
Yeah, this is just another example of government getting into the private business of healthcare and trying to manage how people want to treat their bodies. The bottom line is this is a tough situation for the governor because I'm sure that he's thinking long and hard about how this is going to affect kids all across the state of Ohio. And so he's going to have to make a really tough decision. And, because he's in his second term, he may veto it. We never know, but we'll see this weekend.
As Mike mentioned, the polls are 60% or so, even a plurality of Democrats support restrictions on gender-affirming care for minors, and more than that, support restricting trans girls from participating on female sports teams. So the 60% of the public is with the Republicans on this one.
Yeah, the polls don't lie on that. That's been consistent. So again, the governor's going to have some tough choices to make. But again, it goes back to just like we saw in issue 1. People don't want government in their personal business, and this is just another example of that.
I think it's a little bit different that we're talking about children on the point Derek just made. But I think Jesse said moments ago, all eyes are on the governor, and they will be for a couple days. But then I believe there's enough votes in both the House and Senate to override a veto. I think it's there, and I think they will do it if he vetoes it.
How much of that is a calculation what the governor does, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he has looked at the numbers and he knows the math, and that might be a consideration. I think the Ohio legislature has been interested in overriding other things that the governor has viewed as a strong priority, such as this flavored tobacco ban, and so it'll be in the back of his head, I'm sure.
Joe, I mean, there is conflicting opinions about puberty blockers in particular, long-term health consequences for those. Several European countries, Western European countries, have put restrictions on the puberty blockers. So it's not as cut and dry as some other medical issues that can be legislated.
You're right, and I think that's one of the reasons that we heard testimony on that, actually. You know, a lot of doctors were on both sides of the issue. We didn't hear all the doctors on one side, but we did have the children's hospitals expressing some concern. There have been some changes made to the bill to try to make that a little bit more palatable to them. But you know, these are the kind of things that Governor DeWine's going to be looking at. These are the issues that he wants to know more about this weekend.
Now, Mike, the folks who support gender-affirming care point to, you know, the high rate of suicide among transgender children and them being stigmatized. And they say this therapy can be life-saving for these kids. So why place restrictions on it if the physician deems it necessary for the health of that child?
I have no doubt that's accurate, and that was weighed at the State House. Jesse mentioned there was many amendments and changes made to the bill to harmonize with that, but you also heard testimony from doctors, psychologists, and other medical professionals of the negative unintended consequences of a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old having gender-affirming surgeries or what have you, and the negative unintended consequences when they get older in life. So I think what the legislature did was try to find a balance here in what they proposed.
Is this 1% of the population identifies as transgender? Is this more of a culture war thing? Jesse, how are folks viewing this down at the State House?
I mean, it's certainly not taxes. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we fall into the social issues category here. And is this where Ohio lawmakers should be spending the vast majority of your time? You mentioned there's about 7 transgender girls who are participating in female sports. This is something that the High School Athletic Association has rules and policies around. So obviously the legislature thought that this was something worth taking up. But does the vast majority of Ohioans want them to spend their time in this way? I mean, that's something they can decide at the ballot.
Okay. Let's get to our next topic. It looks like Ohio's newly approved abortion amendment will get its first legal test. Abortion clinic operators and their supporters have asked a Cincinnati judge to rule Ohio's 6-week abortion ban unconstitutional. That same judge put the so-called heartbeat law on hold last year, saying it violated Ohio's Constitution as it stood before Issue 1 passed last month and voters enshrined abortion rights in the Constitution. Jesse Balmert, do we have any idea how and when this judge might rule on this case?
Well, as you pointed out, Judge Jenkins thought that there was a constitutional right to abortion even before Issue 1 took effect, which is a much more explicit right to abortion and other kind of reproductive decisions. And so I think even Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, a Republican who opposed Issue 1, has said that this particular law would not survive under the new constitutional standard that voters approved by about 57% of the votes. So how long will that take? It's hard to say.
Do we know what the state's position is? It hasn't happened yet, but should the judge rule it is unconstitutional, would the state appeal that ruling like it did the earlier one?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it would be difficult because you think Dave Yost is the AG, and he's already been on record multiple times, actually, saying that he thinks that the 6-week law is unconstitutional now that Issue 1 is passed. So he would have to change his narrative there. I think that the reason that they went to court, that the doctors who wanted this law out of the way, the reason they went to court, that group represented by the ACLU and others, is that there's another part of this. The Supreme Court is really considering technicalities right now, and I think there's a will among people to get it, the Supreme Court to say, hey, does it stand? It merits. Look at the merits.
Mike Konadakis, Ohio Right to Life. Should the state appeal this judge's ruling? Should he say that the 6-week ban is unconstitutional?
Well, it's not up to Dave. He's the lawyer. The client is the state of Ohio, the governor, the legislature, so it'll be their ultimate decision whether they appeal it or not. You know, look, Dave Yost is right. You know, the heartbeat law does not harmonize with the new constitutional standard we have in the state of Ohio. I say that regretfully, of course, but this is where we are. The most important issue, Mike, is what Dave Yost has asked the Supreme Court to decide. Can a local judge put a permanent temporary restraining or a temporary restraining order on a law and then slow roll it for 2-3 years in the legal system when after the legislature and the governor signed it? That's what's before the court, and that's what I hope and pray that the Ohio Supreme Court takes up quickly and decides.
Others argue that Dave Yost played a role in slow rolling it with his appeals, but also, Derek, there's the standing case. Can clinics sue on behalf of their patients, which, you know, we saw this case down in Texas where this woman was trying to go through the courts, and she said she didn't have time to get her abortion for the fetus that was predicted to be no longer viable and went out of state. So that's another issue that's before the court as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, of course, clinics can sue on behalf of their clients, but you know, the people have spoken with issue 1. So, you know, that is the new law of our land. It changed the Constitution. There's abortion rights in the Ohio Constitution now. So I don't know why, you know, a lot of times the people's voice get lost in all of this when we start doing all these lawsuits to try to counter what the will of the people has been. And clearly the people wanted abortion rights in the Constitution and won it.
Jesse, this seems like a clear conflict with the heartbeat bill. Seems to be clearly in conflict with the abortion rights amendment. The other things, 24-hour waiting period, the transfer agreement requirement that clinics must have with hospitals, even the parental consent laws. Do we have any movement on those issues yet?
No, really not yet. And we talked with doctors who perform abortions really the day that issue 1 took effect, and was asking, are you still abiding by these rules and these laws? And they said, yes, until we get a really clear legal ruling about what we can and cannot do, we're not going to risk our medical license. We're not going to risk potential criminal charges to potentially go against some of these policies.
Yeah, it's not the Wild West in Ohio. Look, every law is on the books until it's not, okay? The heartbeat law might be the first one to go. It looks like within the next month or so that could be the case, if not sooner. But until otherwise, these are the laws. And what's going to have to happen was what happened at the United States Supreme Court. We had Roe, then we had Casey set what the standard was for judicial review. The Ohio Supreme Court will set that standard, what the judicial review should be for the lower courts and appellate courts in the future.
Where does Ohio Right to Life go from here? Is that where you focus your attention on these restrictions that are in place, like the 24-hour waiting period, the transfer agreements, the parental consent law?
Yeah, well, look, we have a legislative bucket, we have a legal bucket, and we have a change hearts and minds bucket. And those are the 3 buckets we're going to be focused on moving forward. Under the new, we respect the Constitution, we respect the vote of the public, and we understand what we can and cannot do. We're not going to be introducing legislation that would clearly violate that, but there are a lot of things we can do. Diapers, formula, car seats, cribs, making sure women have health care, prenatal care. That's what we're going to be focusing on, and protecting the laws we have on the books.
Can Democrats go too far with this amendment, Derek, if they went, say, after the parental consent law?
There's always that possibility. I mean, I think that the Democrats feel somewhat victorious in issue 1. So I think that right now the Democrats, particularly the Democrats in the legislature, are just trying to see what types of legislation is going to be introduced to try to undermine the new law. And quite honestly, you know, a lot of the courts around the state are going to be looking at the same thing.
In the Supreme Court, Joe, there are races coming up next year, 24, three races. You know, one could be an open seat, depending on what Joe Dieters does.
Right.
So that will abortion will be issue number one, I would assume, in those races.
Yes, and it's going to be very important to see who shows up at the polls next year and how that Senate race turns out, because that's going to be a big teller of how those Supreme Court races end up.
All right, something to watch. Lawmakers have gone home for the holidays without making any changes to Ohio's new law that legalizes recreational marijuana. They considered increasing the taxes on marijuana, changing where the tax proceeds would go. They looked at decreasing the potency of some marijuana products and banning or restricting homegrown marijuana. But in the end, at least for now, the law voters passed in November that went into effect earlier this month remains unchanged. Derek Clay, why do you think lawmakers did not do anything? This Republican-dominated legislature that did nothing on marijuana, but now the voters did. They had a chance to change it, but they didn't. Why do you think that was?
Well, issue 2 passed overwhelmingly, just like issue 1 did. And I think that lawmakers are being very careful as to how far they go against the will of the people. You know, clearly this passed because people wanted it. And so when you start tinkering with, you know, the issues that were on the ballot, then you're gonna definitely have a problem, and it might leak over into some other elections down the road.
Just the other legitimate things that need to be addressed in this legislation, because I know homegrown, Michigan, there was some question about people abusing that for co-ops and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on who you ask. I think if you ask at the governor or the Senate right now, they would say, yes, there are things that we want to do to address things like maybe edibles should not be in the shape of cartoon characters or gummy bears or something. Maybe advertising should be more like alcohol versus, you know, everywhere. How many plants should you grow, I'm sure, is a point of contention between the House and the Senate. But the House is more in the position of saying, like, let's let these regulations play out. Let's let, you know, some of this be handled by Department of Commerce and other kind of rule-setting agencies. And so, I mean, we will see.
Mike, should they just let the law go into effect? I mean, the voters voted overwhelmingly. You have to say that they knew at least most of what they were voting for. It was a long bill, but, you know, recreational marijuana sold first in the medical marijuana places, and more retail establishments come on. You can have 6 to 12 plants in your backyard, and pretty simple.
Yeah, look, the legislature's in a difficult spot. They got to be careful, as Derek said. They got to respect the will of the voters. I voted no, but the majority voted yes. But here's the thing: they missed the boat. They should have done one thing that we all can agree on: ban it in public use. I shouldn't take my 11-year-old son to a park or Easton and have someone walking down the street smoking a joint. That's what they should have done. Would have got bipartisan support. Come back next year if you need to tinker with the taxes or this, that, and the other without making overwhelming changes. That's what they should have done, and they didn't do that. Now, if I take my son to Easton, my 11-year-old son to Easton this weekend, someone can legally walk down the shopping malls smoking a joint outside.
Well, that's a private property in some ways. The streets aren't, I guess.
But the parks, recreational areas, it's fair game, and they could have addressed that, and they didn't.
Joe, the DeWine administration named its first superintendent of the Division of Cannabis Control, and his last job was superintendent of the Division of Liquor Control. It's almost like they want to regulate marijuana like alcohol.
Alcohol, yes.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah, Jim Canepa is well known. He has handled the division over there for a while, done a lot of groundbreaking kind of stuff, and people are familiar with him. And so that makes him kind of a trusted person to put in there right now, because you know what you're getting. He will be the one, of course you were alluding to the name, but that's how they sold this, is to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And so 21 and up can use and buy and all that. The thing is, they've got to figure out all these details about how do you put it in use and where do you put it, how do you structure it so that you can sell it, but sell it in a way that it doesn't get around kids, and make it so it doesn't get used around kids. I mean, there's, if it's alcohol, it shouldn't be used around kids either. So,
one thing I was going to add is that, even with the medical marijuana, there's a bunch of folks that are sitting in jail right now because they were selling marijuana. And there's a whole bunch of folks that invested in this early, and they're making a ton of cash off of marijuana. So whatever comes out of this House bill, we definitely need to talk about expungement of those folks that are sitting in jail right now for selling the same product that these other folks that have licenses now through the state are selling.
And that was a point of possible compromise with Democrats in the legislature. If you could have expungement with perhaps different use of tax money or things like that, it might be a room to compromise.
Yeah, it's just hard to pass these like really sweeping pieces of legislation. Do we need to address home grow and taxes and where the taxes go and everything? You just get to a point where you're breaking down fractions of who's going to support what. So can you peel off some of these issues that would be bipartisanly supported and supported across chambers?
And as longer the law is in effect, the harder it is to repeal and make changes unless something goes wrong. Anyway, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose made it official this week. He filed papers and petitions to run for U.S. Senate. LaRose joins State Senator Matt Dolan and Cleveland businessman Bernie Moreno in the Republican primary. The winner would face Democrat Sherrod Brown in November. He filed his papers this week to become an official candidate. Ohio's primary is just 3 months away. Mike Onadakis, Frank LaRose has the name ID, but he doesn't have the money the other two have. Which wins?
Well, at the end of the day, they're all going to have money. I mean, with 501c4s and other different entities out there, they're going to have plenty of money, whether it shows up in their ledger or in someone else's ledger. Look, Frank is a very formidable candidate. He's ran twice statewide, got more votes than Sherrod Brown did last time. So he's very formidable, but so is Bernie Moreno. I would put those two neck and neck as who's going to be the nominee to take on Sherrod Brown. And look, Sherrod Brown does great in Ohio. You got to tip your cap to him, but he's never run in a year when you have Trump on the ballot. We're going to have that this time. Trump won Ohio not once, but twice by 8 points both times. Trump's going to carry that Republican nominee across the finish line.
Derek, who is the candidate that Sherrod Brown wants to face?
I would say that he will want to face Matt Dolan. You know, they're both living in the Cleveland area. They're both the less of the of the other candidates out there. Matt Dolan is the candidate that is most sensible, in my opinion.
The least
right?
Trumpy
The least
candidate.
Trumpy, because
Yes.
everybody tries to out-Trump Trump, and that seems to be the thing now.
Wouldn't that be a tougher opponent for Sherrod Brown? Because
listen, I think Sherrod Brown beats any one of these candidates. He is the people's senator in this state. He's proven it. And even though he has not been on the ballot when Trump has run, he still has been a very solid leader for not only Democrats, but Republicans in this state as well.
Jesse, Frank LaRose waited until almost right to the deadline to file. There was some question whether or not he actually was going to pull the trigger and run because of his defeats and the two issues won. But he did. He pulled the trigger and he's in the race.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how much that is brought up by his political opponents, whether that will become an issue in the primary or probably more likely in the general if he wins the primary. I think the most surprising thing about this race so far is how little we're talking about it. Mm-hmm. So much of the oxygen was taken up by issue 1 and issue 2 with the November election. We're heading into the holidays. So really they're going to have a few months to introduce and convince voters that they're the person that should take on Sherrod Brown.
And Joe, that's where the money comes in. Bernie Moreno has been up on TV for quite a while. Matt Dolan more so than certainly Frank LaRose. You know, so they have a bit of a head start because they have the personal wealth, and Frank LaRose hasn't raised the money that we know of so far.
Yeah, his campaign says he's a thousandaire instead of a millionaire, and you know, definitely Moreno and Dolan have more money. But the money only goes so far in this equation. You think about it, Moreno had to spend a lot of money up front because statewide he's not well known. And Matt Dolan, again, you know, he was you did very well when he ran for Senate last time around with Republicans, but this is a different time. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in the next 3 months because money may not be the final indicator of where it ends up. How
do Republicans view Frank LaRose's strong advocacy for the 60% threshold and then strong advocacy against the Abortion Rights Amendment? Did he win a lot of goodwill among Republican voters there?
Sure, he sure did in all 88 counties. Look, I traveled a lot for both issue 1s and was every town hall I was at, it was either Frank LaRose or Bernie Moreno. And sometimes I'd be with Frank 2, 3, 4 times a day and Bernie the same. So Republican voters have a long memory and they saw the work that both put in, but especially Frank. He really led with his chin on that, and I think it's going to play well with the base.
In the primary. We'll see
We'll see
what happens
Yes.
come the general. Let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Mike Gonadakis, you're up first.
Yeah, surprisingly, the mentions of term limits and tinkering with them came up at the State House this week. Let me cut to the chase here. If that goes before the voters, it's going to go over like a lead balloon. I think we need to get back to focusing on other things. Voters have spoken. Term limits are here to stay, and let's leave them where they are.
All right, Derek.
I think we have a dynasty on our hands with the Columbus Crew. 2008, 2020, and 2023. I think we're in a dynasty here for our beloved crew.
And the season tickets for all next year are already sold out. Amazing. Joe Ingles.
Well, the reporters are exhausted going into the end of this year, and we know a lot of voters are exhausted from all the voting this year, and it seems like a lot happened this year. But when you look back at what actually happened as far as legislation being passed, we only had about 14 bills by my count that passed, and a couple of those were kind of minor bills. So we saw a legislature that didn't do as much as normal legislatures do.
And Jesse.
Ohio presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy had a bit of an oops moment this week when he didn't turn off the sound of his feed while taking a bathroom break with Elon Musk. So there you go.
His very own Naked Gun movement for fans of that movie. Speaking of term limits, wasn't term limits brought up by former House Speaker, now convicted felon Larry Householder? That was his next move had House Bill 6 gone off without any hitches. But so that's to Mike's point. I'm not sure that would go over too well with voters, and that would be brought up by opponents of getting rid of term limits. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. We urge you to continue the conversation on Facebook, and you can watch us anytime on your time at our website, wosu.org/COTR. We're also on YouTube and the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.